we go.
Okay, so this is the Thursday, March 10th meeting of the Places 29 North Community Advisory Committee. Meeting is being held pursuant to emergency ordinance number 20A16, an ordinance to ensure continuity of government during COVID-19 disaster. Committee members present who are electronically present at this chair are Tony, you're here. Okay, Tony Pagnuccio, Jimmy Dean,
Yes.
Steve, are you here? We don't have Steve. Virginia Newton, Deborah Van Ursel.
Here.
Brittany Kosich.
Here.
David Mitchell here.
Here.
Okay, and Seth Kennard.
Here.
And B. Lapisto Kirtley just checked in. All right. And the participants, people from the county staff, Dave Benish, Carolyn Schaefer, Jessica Hirsch-Balding. Is that close enough, Jessica?
Close enough, thank you.
Okay, and Kevin McDermott. Although Kevin said he's just listening, right? So the next order of business is to adopt the meeting minutes from February. Did everybody have a chance to review them that was at the meeting? Of course, you that were not, you can't review the minutes. Are there any suggested changes? Okay, all in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. And if no one objects, I'd like to make a slight change to the agenda. Since we have a bunch of new members, I would ask them if they so choose to just introduce themselves. Many of you are representing particular stakeholders or in the Places 29 area. Just kind of introduce yourselves. Let us know who you are and kind of a little bit about your background. And I'm going to go. Brittany, you're at the top right, so you can go first.
All right, I'm Brittany Kozik. I work at Story House Real Estate. I'm a realtor there, and I'm also a resident of Forest Lakes. So very excited to be a part of this committee and just have a voice and hear kind of what's going on. So very excited about it.
Great, thanks, Brittany. Seth?
Hey, good evening. I'm Seth Kennard. I am currently the principal of Baker Butler Elementary School, which is off of Prophet Road of 29. I am my 13th year as a principal, but third year as a principal here in Albemarle County. So prior to being here, I was a principal in Alexandria City. And I'm excited to be here and answer questions and represent the educational community.
Great. Deborah?
I'm Deborah Van Ursel. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Marketing for the UVA Foundation. We are a large landowner in Charlottesville, including the North Fork UVA's Discovery Park, north of town, near the airport. I've been with the foundation for 20 years or so. Before that, I was the CEO of the Realtor Association for 10 years. So I'm familiar with the area, and real estate's my gig, I guess. Brittany, I know your gal Sasha real well. She's a good friend. I would spend a few months at Montague Miller and Company for a little while between realtors and the foundation, and I presented at the last meeting. My role is a little bit more than real estate, but I'm here in that real estate capacity.
Okay, and David, I know you were at the last meeting, but we really didn't do it at this last meeting. So if you could just give us a short intro into David Mitchell.
Sure. My name is David Mitchell. I work for Great Eastern Management Company. We own the North Point property across the street from Devers. And as you can see, we're doing the first residential sections over there now. And so I'm here as a capacity as a developer and landowner in the area.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn this over to Jessica, who's going to give us an overview for transportation planning overview and Places 29 proposal update. So take it away, Jessica.
Great, thanks, Bill. And now that I've started sharing my screen, I will not be able to see the rest of you. So if you have any questions, David Benish, if you could just stop me and I can take questions throughout the presentation, or we can save them for the end.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm going to ask people to click the raise hand button if they have a question.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as we said before, my name is Jessica Hirsch-Ballering. I am a principal transportation planner with Albemarle County Community Development. I work with planning manager Kevin McDermott, who is also here today. I've been with the county for a little over half a year, so Kevin can help answer any questions that you may have on projects that predate me. So today's presentation is a little more than just an update about ongoing or upcoming projects. We want to give you this big picture of the whole transportation planning process. So we want to help answer the questions of where do projects come from? How are transportation projects chosen? How do we pay for transportation projects? How are projects scheduled? And then eventually we'll get to what projects are being worked on in your area right now. So first, where do projects come from? So we get ideas for projects mostly by recognizing existing traffic problems and anticipating where more traffic problems are likely to arise. We identify and anticipate those problems by gathering and analyzing a lot of data and by collaborating with other organizations who help gather and analyze data as well. So we work very closely with the Virginia Department of Transportation, or VDOT. They are constantly monitoring measures of congestion and safety, especially the number of crashes, the type and the severity of crashes. VDOT also performs more targeted and detailed safety analyses at intersections or along corridors. Analyses like these help us identify where problems exist and where they might arise in the future, and what might be causing the problems so that we can work with engineers to design effective solutions to those problems. Also, because Kevin and I work in community development, we help review all of the new and redevelopment applications that come into the county. It's part of our job to anticipate when development is going to generate more traffic in an area, and then to work with the developer to identify appropriate mitigations. For really big developments, we would likely request the developer conduct a TIA, or a transportation impact analysis. With the TIA, they would hire a special analyst to model what traffic will look like in an area if the new development is built. And that info is very useful for identifying those appropriate mitigations for a development, or even saying that a certain development isn't appropriate for an area. We also work with the Charlottesville-Albemarle Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. They put together a long-range transportation plan that models existing and expected future transportation patterns based on existing and expected development. The future models are for about 20 years in the future, so a long way out. The models aren't perfect, but they're an essential starting point because, as you'll see later in this presentation, the timelines for transportation projects are really long. So we need to start planning how we're going to address those future problems now. Also, we work with others in community development and other departments at the county to develop a variety of plans. So as you may know, the comprehensive plan covers the whole Albemarle County. Master plans look at smaller areas of the county, and corridor plans look at specific transportation corridors. We'll actually talk about a corridor plan that is going on in your area right now, later in the presentation. So all these plans look at that relationship between land use, between development and transportation. So we can identify those existing and expected transportation pain points and make plans to address them. Further, these plans involve a lot of community input. So we get to hear directly from residents, things like, where are you guys seeing problems? where do you expect problems to arise in the future, and what transportation needs do you have right now that are not being met? This is just a slide to show off some of the pretty plans that the county has put together and that help us make our transportation plans. And then how are projects chosen? So there are a lot of possible projects, but also limited resources. So we have to determine which projects are going to have the greatest benefit to the county. We have a document that lists out all of the county transportation priorities, and that document is approved by the Board of Supervisors. So all of the possible projects that we've come up with in that early planning stage are listed in this document. And then they're ranked according to selected metrics that you see on the slide here: safety, congestion, economic development, accessibility, land use, and environmental impact. For each of these metrics, we give each project a quantitative score. We sum the scores for each project across all metrics, and then we can more easily compare the projects and rank them relative to each other. So for safety, what we're looking at is crash data, mostly the number of crashes in a particular area, the type of crashes, and the severity of those crashes. For congestion, we're looking at traffic volumes and the results from those transportation impact assessments that we talked about earlier. For economic development, we're considering the economic growth areas that have been identified by those plans, like the comp plan or the economic development plans. For accessibility, we're looking at a lot of different things. We're looking at jobs data to make sure that jobs in our area are accessible. We are looking at census data to ensure that areas with higher concentrations of historically underserved populations get transportation options. And we're also looking at the bike and pedestrian networks to identify gaps and other areas that need connectivity. For land use, we are looking at areas where population density is increasing. And we're also considering proximity and connectivity to destinations like schools, parks, libraries, and other resources. And then lastly, we have environmental impact. This metric wasn't used the last time we put together the transportation priorities document, but we will be using it in the future. This metric will prioritize projects that help decrease our greenhouse gas emissions and projects that improve but don't expand on existing facilities. The transportation priorities list was last updated in 2019, but we are embarking on an update of the list over the next couple of years as part of the comprehensive plan update process. So just a little bit more detail on prioritization. So projects get scored and they get ranked number 1, number 2 through whatever. And we mostly work through the list starting with the highest priority project. But it doesn't exactly always go number 1, then we finish number 1 and we move on to number 2 and so on. There's a lot of different factors that go into choosing which project we move forward. So if it makes sense to group projects, let's say 1, 5, and 6, we might do that and then come back to numbers 2 through 4 at a later date. Or projects 1 through 3 are all very expensive, but number 4 is cheaper and we might have an opportunity to fund a smaller project. So we might do that and then go back to 1, 2, and 3 when we have a different funding opportunity. So this slide shows a map of all of the projects in your area that are on the 2019 transportation priorities list. The number associated with each project is the project's priority ranking on that list. The projects listed with letters are projects that have been added since 2019, so they haven't had a chance to be ranked yet. They'll get ranked when we do that reprioritization or that prioritization update we talked about. You might see some numbers that appear twice. I think number 5 appears twice, and that's because we had a really big project idea. It was ranked number 5, and then later it got broken up into smaller, more manageable pieces. Let's see, projects that were ranked and completed, I believe have been removed from this list. So funding mechanisms, how are projects funded? I'm just going to put these all on the slide all at once. This slide shows some funding options that the county uses pretty frequently. Smart Scale is our main way of funding projects. It's a Virginia-specific funding source. It's great for funding really big projects because it doesn't have a limit to how high of an amount of money you can ask for. We also don't need to commit any local funds to these projects. Smart Scale will cover the entire project cost if that's what you ask for and it scores well enough. It is a competitive process and it's rather competitive. It only comes around every 2 years. And this is how the scoring works. So every 2 years, the county can submit up to 4 project applications. Now the Charlottesville Albemarle MPO, as well as the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, which we work with very closely, they can also each submit 4 projects. So we can work with them and request that they submit additional projects on our behalf. But there is still a limit on the total number of projects we can request, the total number of applications we can submit every single year or every single round, because it's every 2 years. VDOT will then score all of the projects based on criteria that are very similar to those criteria that we use for our own prioritization process. They then divide the score for each project by the project's cost, and the projects with the highest benefit cost ratio are the ones that get funded. The next funding mechanism we'll talk about is revenue sharing. We also frequently use this one. This is also state funding. It's also a competitive process, but it's better for smaller projects compared to Smart Scale because there is a limit. You can only request, the project can only cost $10 million. And you can only request a grand total of $10 million for every funding cycle. So you could do multiple smaller ones, but you max out at 10 million for the entire 2-year cycle. Also, we need to use local funds to cover half of the project cost. And if a project ends up costing more than $10 million, or the total for that cycle ends up costing more than $10 million, we need to use local funds to cover the entirety of those cost overruns. And then transportation alternatives. This is a federal source of funds, mostly for bicycle and pedestrian projects. It is really good for really small projects because it has a max of $1 million per project or per grant cycle. And we have to cover 20% of the project cost with local funds. Also, because it's federal funding, we need to meet additional federal requirements with our project, both the process and the actual end product, and that can drive up project costs. Oh, and the secondary 6-year plan. This is not a competitive funding source. This is money that is given to the county by the state. They determine how much we get. We mostly need to use it to pave unpaved roads, but there is some funding within the secondary 6-year plan that is categorized as TELEFI, and TELEFI is more flexible. It's mostly used for small maintenance projects, but we do have some flexibility and we have used it for construction projects in the past. And now we're moving on to funding mechanisms that are less frequently utilized by the county. So first we have state of good repair. State of good repair funding is mostly used for bridges and a little bit for road repair. We as the county do not apply for state of good repair funds. This VDOT has its own process for where they are going to put state of good repair funds. So they're really in charge of that, but sometimes it does come and help us fund projects. HSIP is pretty similar. We don't, this is funding that can be used in a variety of ways, and we don't really apply for those funds either. VDOT has their own process. They prioritize safety focused projects, and they just move down their priority list for this. And sometimes that helps construct things in the county. And then there's other federal, state, and funding opportunities. There's no way I could list all of them here, but one big one at the top of this list of other funding opportunities would be RAISE. RAISE is this giant federal program. There's $1.5 billion available within RAISE right now. So that is an option. It's incredibly competitive, but we're always looking for other opportunities to fund projects. So we keep that in mind when we're thinking about all the different ways to fund projects. And then there's local funding. So the SIP, or Capital Improvement Program, is where all of our local funding comes from. It can be used to leverage state or federal funding, like I described on those previous slides, or it can be used to fund a project outright. Specifically within the Capital Improvement Program, there is an account called the Transportation Leveraging Fund that is specifically used to fund local projects or leverage the state and local funding. Of course, we can't just take whatever funding we want from the SIP. We work with other departments and the Board of Supervisors to make requests for the upcoming year's budget. So that's how we get the local funding. And then there's also developer funded or constructed improvements. So we can also get developers to do some of the work for us or to pay for some transportation projects. So when we expect that a development project is going to exacerbate or create traffic issues, they can offer to mitigate those issues by offering money towards a road project or by building a bike or pedestrian or piece of transit infrastructure outright. Okay, and this slide just is intended to show you the general schedule of a project once it's been funded. So there's 3 main phases of a project. Once it's been funded, we start with design. Design is where you move from this like general project idea to, like, you might think, here's this intersection that needs improvement and we're going to put a roundabout there because that's going to improve safety at this intersection. Design is the point where you have engineers come in and they really draw up a detailed plan that the construction folks can go out there and work with in the future. Right-of-way acquisition is the second phase. Roadway projects and other transportation infrastructure sometimes require land, and then we may be in the position, or the state may be in the position, to try to acquire that right-of-way to make the project happen. And then lastly, we move into construction. And then the second half of the slide, the bottom half, is just intended to show you that transportation projects, no matter their funding source, take a really long time to go from here's a funded project to here's a constructed project. And depending on the funding source, it can take more or less time. So our locally funded projects, those ones that we're funding from the Transportation Leveraging Fund, those happen relatively quickly for transportation projects. Those can happen in about 3 to 5 years. Projects that use state or federal funding, like transportation alternatives or revenue sharing, those projects are going to take a little bit longer. They have a few more requirements than the projects that are done with completely locally funded. Transportation alternatives or revenue sharing may take anywhere from about 5 to 8 years. And then lastly, we have smart scale. Smart scale takes a really long time. Remember, these are big projects with lots of funding. They can take 8 to 11 years, not just because they're big projects that take a long time, but because, and Kevin may have to jump in if I get this wrong, the state, when they award funding to a particular project, they program that funding at the very end of the 6-year plan. So there's a couple of years. So once you get funded, there's a couple of years where we kind of sit on the project and we aren't able to do anything until we reach the end of the 6-year plan. And we can start using the funding for design and then right of way and then construction. So smart scale projects can take anywhere from 8 to 11 years. Occasionally they're fast tracked, but this is kind of the timeline we're expecting when we submit those applications. I'm going to take a quick break for a second. Does anyone have any questions about the transportation process that I laid out? Otherwise, we can move into some projects that are happening in your area. All right, I'll move on. So one project happening in your area is the Berkmar extension. So this builds a new section of Berkmar that extends from just north of Timberwood up to Airport Road. It will include bike lanes and sidewalks. And while what you're looking at on the screen is an early design, I did want to let you know that the final design will be substantially similar to what you're seeing right here. So this project is already fully funded. It received funding through revenue sharing, and we also use tele-fee funds to also cover some of these project costs. In terms of schedule for this Berkmar project, you can expect to hear about a public meeting that VDOT will be hosting in the fall or early winter of this year. And then they're going to do a lot of that design work and that right-of-way work behind the scenes. And you won't see any construction in this area until fall of 2025. And then you can expect that the project will be complete about 12 to 18 months later. The next project I want to talk about is a shared use path along Route 29. So this project is not actually occurring in your CAC area, but it's close enough that I thought you guys might want to hear about it. So this project will construct an asphalt shared use path on the east side of 29 between Carsbrook, which if you can see my mouse is down here, all the way up to Seminole Lane North, which is up here. This project has been fully funded through Smart Scale, and remember, Smart Scale is on a really long timeline. So you won't hear about a public meeting about this project until spring of 2027. There's a chance it might get fast-tracked or moved up in the future, but right now we won't be talking about this again until 2027. Now, the big picture with this shared use path is to connect this shared use path that we've been talking about with the shared use path that already exists in your area. And as it's coming south, it ends at Polo Grounds Road. One of the trickiest parts of connecting this future shared use path with the existing shared use path is getting a path across the Rivanna River right here. So there's no plans to actually make that connection yet, but it is something that we're thinking about for the big picture to improve bike ped connectivity. All right, and this is, I put the word corridor on here too many times, the Route 29 corridor study. This is a study, and we talked about studies like this earlier, how they help us identify problem areas and imagine solutions. This study has been happening in collaboration with VDOT and the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. We've hired consultants to help us with a lot of the technical work for this. This study is examining 29 between Airport Road to the south, all the way up to Deerfield Drive in Greene County. They've specifically been looking at a couple of intersections. So they've been specifically looking at Airport Road, Lewis and Clark, Boulders, Fraze Mill, and Matthews Mill roads. They haven't shared their final recommendations with us yet, but they will be doing that soon, and they will also be hosting a public meeting in May. And then, I don't know if you guys are aware, but it's very possible that some microtransit service will be coming to your area. And the reason for this goes back a couple of years. The Albemarle County worked with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission to get a grant from the Department of Rail and Public Transit to conduct a study. That study was called the Albemarle County Transit Expansion Study. And that study looked at how can we get better transit service in 3 key areas of the county. And one of those key areas was the North 29 corridor. Transit consultants came in, these are transit experts, and their recommendation for the North 29 area was to improve transit service by trying out microtransit. If you've never heard of microtransit, microtransit operates a lot like Uber, where you say, I need a ride somewhere. And if you are within this pink area on the screen, you could use an app on your phone to request a ride. And within about 15 minutes, you get someone to come pick you up and take you to your destination. So they can either take you to a destination, another destination within this pink area, or they can take you, it would still have to be within the pink area, but they could connect you to a fixed route service to take you elsewhere in the county or the city. the way that microtransit differs from Uber or Lyft is that it's not run as a private business, it's run as a public utility. So every single vehicle within the microtransit fleet is going to be accessible for wheelchair users. Every single and you're not going to see any surge pricing. So there is a set price for the microtransit service, and that's what you pay. If you've ever used Uber or Lyft at a peak period, you know that those prices can jump up, but that's not going to happen because this is intended to be a public utility. One thing to point out is that we do not have funding for this microtransit service yet. We have a grant application in. We are waiting to hear if the Department of Rail and Public Transit is going to help fund this service for a trial year, but we will find out if they're going to fund it later this spring. And if our grant application is successful, we would be looking at 1 year of trying this service. And that 1 year would start in January of 2023. And if that 1 year trial service is successful, the microtransit service could continue into the future. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can better see everybody. All right. Bill, did you want to call on people?
I was just going to ask people to raise their hands and have Carolyn call on them, the people that raise their hands. So I know I raised my hand, Carolyn, but anybody else?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. Supervisor Lepesto Kirkley, I'm gonna let you go first.
You're muted, Keith.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, very good presentation. Thank you very much. And also, on your one slide that was on the Carsbrook, and just an FYI, it always helps to number the slides so we can refer to slide number such and such. But on the one that refers to Carsbrook along Seminole Trail, you said there's an asphalt trail. Would you tell me about that? Because I know there's a sidewalk going from Carsbrook all the way up. So where are we putting the asphalt trail if there's already a sidewalk going all the way up north?
Yeah, great question. The shared use path would replace the sidewalk. It would be probably 10 feet wide so that it can accommodate both bicyclists and pedestrians.
Okay, so they're taking out the sidewalk and they're just widening it.
Yes.
Okay, so second question, wouldn't it make sense just to widen the sidewalk with asphalt? You'd have two different surfaces, but wouldn't that cut down on the cost? You have the sidewalk, which is smoother usually than an asphalt. Just wondering.
It's a great question, and I'm going to look to Kevin to help me answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. This is Kevin McDermott. I'm the transportation planning manager. So we could look at that. I think that part of the idea is that the asphalt path does provide a more smooth surface actually for bicycling. Sidewalks have the cracks in them, so you feel that as you're going over it. But also it's very difficult to make a real seal between asphalt and concrete, and we'd probably end up getting weeds, and it would get looking kind of trashy pretty quickly. So that's why we're moving to that, and it keeps it consistent with the existing path that runs up 29 from Polo Grounds north.
Kevin, I knew you'd have an answer. I was thinking that, but I knew you'd have an answer. So thank you very much. No more questions.
All right, next I'm going to go to David Mitchell. David, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so Kevin might have an answer for this, but I was wondering if y'all have decided if there's been any permanent change in transportation count, the way that people are changing their lifestyle.
Yeah, I can try and answer that. We do continue to discuss transportation counts around the county and the state with VDOT. And there was a report that they released, and I haven't read it, but I can try and see if I can find that and get the key information from it again. But at this point, and I assume you're referring to post-pandemic traffic volume. So they think at this time our volumes are still not back up to what they were prior to this, but they don't think that there's going to be some significant increase to go back up to the pre-pandemic levels. That they think that this is sort of the new normal. People have changed their driving habits. There are a lot more people that work from home, or at least part-time, that kind of thing. So they do think that that transportation, or that the volumes overall have shifted slightly downward. And that's even especially noticeable for peak hour times, is that peak hour times don't see that major surge like we used to, where everybody used to go in at a certain time. People have a lot more flexibility with that. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more data coming around over the next few years about that, but that's what we're looking at right now.
Well, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, obviously, peak hour is the design criteria for everything. And that's good. I mean, I think that'll be helpful for everybody. Thanks.
Next, I'm gonna go to Tony, and then Bill, I'll let you follow up at the end. Tony, please unmute yourself.
Tony,
Okay.
unmute. Oh, okay.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sure as planners, Kevin and Jessica, you're concerned about the length of time for these projects. With the current new normal relative to inflation, when you're talking about a project going 8 to 11 years out, from what it was planned for at X dollars, in 10 or 11 years, it might be 2X dollars. So I know it's not easy to truncate these times, and certainly you don't have control over that. But how even when there was low inflation, how do planners deal with that? The inflation factor affecting costs.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tony. And it's one that our funders, are being the state, are very aware of. So when we put in applications for projects like Smart Scale that we know are not going to be funded for many years into the future, we not only account for contingencies in our cost estimates, we also account for inflation. So that makes those cost estimates feel very, very big, but it's because of exactly what you're talking about, acknowledging that inflation is a real thing and we need to be preparing to pay for it in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bill, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, the first question, I think B covered it on the multi-use path. It was, there was already a sidewalk there. But my question in relation to that, expanding that, is there enough room on the bridge over the Rivanna River to expand that path on that side to 10 feet?
I don't think so. Kevin, has that actually been investigated?
We have looked at that. There is not 10 feet of sidewalk on that bridge, at least on the side where the shared use path is right now. There's I think a very small pedestrian area over there. We have looked at it and have tried to think of different ways that we could get across. And this is, as Jessica mentioned, we recognize that it's going to be a difficult task to get it over there. Some options that we could look at are the lanes on the bridge are fairly wide. We could possibly look at what they call a lane diet. So reducing each of the lanes slightly to give us a little bit more room. There's also some additional room on the opposite side that maybe we could make up. So with little shifts, there's an opportunity there. But I'm not going to say that actually putting the path on the bridge is going to be our ultimate answer there. There may be a need to put a second bridge adjacent to it. So we'll have to keep all those options open as we look forward or into the future.
There's no option to say put another path on the other side of 29. That's not being considered at this point as an alternative.
So you're saying to move the shared, or to add an adjacent shared use path on the west side of 29 also?
Correct. Correct.
That's not the immediate plan.
Okay.
You never know if sometime in the future that might be necessary, but these are expensive projects. And so we're going to probably do our best with what we have on the east side for as long as we can.
I'm going to stay on the path for a little bit because I know and B may be able to help it out on this, but I know that the county has always wanted to have a bicycle trail, going down Rivanna River from Albemarle into Charlottesville. And I think there was an issue with property and condemning property, but if we're going to expand that path, I don't know if there's any plans or if that's just completely not in the realm of possibility to complete that path along the Rivanna River.
I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and try and answer it, Jessica.
Okay.
You're welcome to jump in. So I would not say that's completely out of the realm of possibility. And on the transportation priorities map that Jessica showed you, that is one of the priorities that we've got listed on there. And we work with the Parks and Recreation Department in Albemarle County a lot, and they are very interested in the same thing. We see it as both a recreation resource and a transportation resource.
Right.
So they have done some initial studies to see how a greenway could fit along the Rivanna, going from 29 all the way down to the Pantops area. And
right.
They do have some general plans for it, and there are some pinch points, but I think over the period of years, that's something we could slowly put together in segments, and eventually there could be that full path.
And
Okay.
I'm just going to jump in since you mentioned me. I am on the Rivanna Bridge project. We're trying to build a pedestrian bicycle bridge across the Rivanna River from Pantops, possibly to either Riverside or Woollen Mills, one of those two locations. But we're looking at that also. And when you mentioned, Kevin, possibly putting a bridge across the Rivanna River there for the current on 29, we're looking at figures just across the Rivanna River from Pantops to Woollen Mills, anywhere from 8 to 12 million or 14 million. Very expensive. So, I mean, anything you can do to maybe narrow the lanes and be able to get people through, that would probably be the fastest and most expedient way to do things.
Okay. And getting off the subject of the multi-use path, can you either Keith or Jessica, you mentioned that people can provide input to the planners. Is there a website or a link that people, or a methodology individuals have to give their input? And if so, could you maybe send that information to me? Because if I put the information out to the community, that'd be a good thing to include in there.
Sure, and I can follow up by email with you, Bill, but
Okay.
just for everybody, if you have a very specific concern, sometimes the easiest way to reach out, you can reach out to VDOT at the my.vdot, I can't remember the exact URL, but
Okay.
VDOT has a place where you can make quick comments about more like specific things, like there's downed trees in a particular area, or you're having some issues with potholes or things like that.
Oh, I was thinking more in terms of the planning process,
Sure.
that would,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And
Yeah, and
I think for that, being involved in the upcoming comprehensive plan update would be a great way to make your voice heard.
okay. And the other thing that occurred to me was you considered safety a priority or a prime consideration. I'm presuming you factor in school entrances and traffics to and from school as an even higher priority, so to speak, within the safety. Just to make sure that we don't create a situation where school buses and school children are not as safe as they could possibly be. That's part of your planning, I presume.
Yeah, we definitely have recognition of schools as big traffic generators, especially during peak periods at morning drop off and at evening pickup. So we're aware of that, and that does factor in.
Yeah, I know, because I know COVID created quite a number of issues along those lines. The last thing, I'm sure everybody looking at the timelines looked at that and say, well, that takes a long time to get these things done. And I'm wondering if there's any work on either at the state or federal or your level of doing something to modernize, update the system of funding and planning and getting these things going that might possibly accelerate these a little bit.
I don't have any overall changes that are being made, but I did talk a little bit about some smart scale projects being fast tracked. So when there is the opportunity, VDOT does try to move up that schedule, and the county has been lucky enough to have 4 of our smart scale projects fast tracked from our last round of smart scale applications. So there are a couple projects that we wouldn't have seen anything on them until 2027, but we're going to start seeing stuff for them happening in July of this year and in 2025.
And last question, can you send us a PDF of the presentation that you gave? I don't know if it was available beforehand or not, but if you could, maybe through Carolyn, get that out to the people on the committee.
Yeah, I can do
just
that.
so we have a little more, especially as we're trying to put out information to the rest of the community, it would be very helpful.
Of course.
Okay, great, thanks.
Virginia, Bill, Virginia has some questions.
Sure, go ahead, Virginia.
Yeah, I just said, I just wanted to say that I do appreciate widening of the sidewalk. I used to ride my bike from Forest Lakes to Albemarle Square, and yeah, once you cross Polo Grounds, it gets a little dicey, especially if they're pedestrians. But I wondered if there's any thought to expanding the sidewalk path, mixed use, whatever, past Coles. I know you have to cross at Hollymead at the crossing light, but then the sidewalk ends, which is a really good book, but not appropriate.
This is on the west side of 29 you're talking
Correct.
about?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any projects, but I will again defer to Kevin.
That is another piece that is prioritized, is to once you cross there at North Hollymead, I believe is where the crossing is, to change that little segment or change that segment to a shared use path, and also try and get into off of 29, say to Berkmar, where we also have some shared use paths and also bike lanes and sidewalks on those other roads. But yeah, there is a piece in that priority list that shows the connection from the crossing up to Coles area.
Yeah, we, after the last meeting, when we talked about UVA, my husband and I went over there and tried to figure out if there's a way to get from Forest Lakes to DIA. And pretty much, yeah, once you get to the end of the entrance to UVA, you got to go on grass. So and again, I know it's in the future, but it would be really nice to have that capacity to walk / bike up to DIA. So that's all.
And I will say that the planning process that Jessica mentioned for the 29 North Corridor, that was another recommendation, was to add bike ped facilities, extending all the way up really through the entire development area. So to DIA and to like the Briarwood neighborhood and all of that. So it's something that is on our radar.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right, next we have Deborah. Deborah, please unmute yourself.
I had a question for Kevin and Jessica, really, and that gets back to your comment about fast tracking. And I'm just curious, what is fast tracking? What happens when you fast track something? What are the requirements? Do you have to have certain asks? What hoops do you have to jump through for that?
Kevin, you can jump in, but my understanding is we did not jump through any hoops. We did not make any requests. VDOT just shuffled their money around and realized that they had the money for these projects available sooner than expected. And they made the decision about which projects to fast track. Now, when we heard about it, they explained there is a logic to it. A lot of these projects are bundled together. So we had a project that was funded in an even earlier round of Smart Scale that had finally made it to like the design and build stage. And it was happening in a similar area to another one of these projects that we had just gotten funded. So they fast tracked that one that we had just gotten funded so they could do the construction work ultimately together, which would save on costs and would also just create less construction chaos. Other ones made sense to do together because they want to have the same consultant do the designing all at once for all these similar projects. So that's there's a logic to it, but we're not, as far as I understand, we're not really involved in the decision making.
Yeah, that Jessica's got that absolutely correct. I think my understanding with the reason these projects were able to be fast tracked was because of additional federal money that had been made available. I think it was some of maybe the Build Back Better, or not Build Back Better, but the infrastructure funding and some of the pandemic related funding that had come to VDOT. And so they were able to use that to create other savings for themselves by moving projects forward.
A follow-on question to that would be, the revenue sharing program is not like the Smart Scale. Smart Scale is all about VDOT, right? And is revenue sharing, is that VDOT? But that's the state, but is that state money through VDOT?
Yes.
So it would be the same idea about fast tracking. You can't really, they would fast track it if they had cash. It's not like something you could say, we really need this, will you fast track any particular project?
And I don't think that revenue sharing is really one of those projects that they do much fast tracking on, in part because the timeline is so much shorter, and also because they're not programming stuff way out in the future. They're programming it for when they really expect it to be ready.
That's absolutely true, Deborah. I'll just add that the state did recently make a proposal that revenue sharing was going to start going on that same programming schedule that Smart Scale is on, where they only fill those back 2 years of the 6-year plan. So you would have to sit and wait for like 4 years on a project. And apparently all the localities around the state were like, no, you can't do that because this is what we've recognized as a way to get projects a little bit faster. And so there's a big pushback. And I think VDOT's kind of backing off that idea and keeping revenue sharing as something that they fund it generally in the next year of the 6-year plan instead of holding that off.
Okay. Got it. Well, I think that's a good thing.
Mhm.
I'll take that as a win.
Next we have Brittany.
Yes, I was kind of going off of what Virginia had mentioned earlier about the sidewalks, and I see a Hollymead is the only place where there's a crosswalk to get to the other side. Are there any other spots that we could potentially add crosswalks? Just throwing that out there.
I can't remember if that was considered as part of the 29 corridor study, but just generally getting crossings of a major roadway with the kinds of traffic volumes and speeds that we see on 29 is challenging. It has to be done right to ensure that the people who are using it are able to use it safely. So it's not easy, but I understand that there's a big need. Otherwise, it becomes this huge barrier to communities on either side. Kevin, did you have anything to add?
No, but that we share the concern, and we are often fighting with VDOT to try and get them to find ways to allow us to put new pedestrian crossings there. They're very reticent. They often are very concerned about the throughput of vehicles at intersections. And when you add a pedestrian phase to crossing, that slows that down. And 29 is an important corridor for them. So it's a fight that we've been having with them for a long time. We have heard recently that they are doing an evaluation of potential locations along 29 where some at-grade crossings could be installed. So they are looking at that. I think they've finally recognized, because unfortunately we have had a number of fatalities of pedestrians crossing 29. And I think they're finally realizing that not offering pedestrian crossings is not actually a solution to the safety issue that it can cause. It can still result in a safety problem. So we're going back and forth with them, trying to find ways to do it.
Yep. And then one more, when you were speaking of the study on the 29 North Corridor, is that for stoplights or widening the roads? I just feel like with the new communities coming in, it already backs up right at Airport Road anyways when it goes to 2. Is that kind of what y'all are studying, or what's that for?
Yeah, good question. Corridor studies are a lot more general. So they are really looking at overall safety and operations of the corridor. Once they looked at like the whole corridor at a very zoomed out level, they zoomed in on those 5 intersections that we talked about. And what they're doing there is looking at those things like the crashes and the number of seconds it takes for vehicles to make it through the intersection, to determine how they can balance that safety and throughput in order to make it a more effective intersection.
Okay, next we have David Mitchell again. David, go ahead.
Yeah, how far north right now does the timing of the lights coordinate? You know how, Kevin, they have that timing with the platooning. Where does that timing stop right now? You know, anybody know?
I do not know. I'm pretty sure it stops at Airport right now. I think it goes all the way up there. And I just say that because I do drive the corridor, and that's when it seems like it goes up. And after you get north of there, the signals start to appear to me to be a little bit of an older model of signals. So, but I can't be sure if that's exactly the case.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions on transportation? Just going once.
Bill,
Sure,
can I
Jimmy.
get in? How
Sure.
do I get in?
Sure.
You here?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I like some discussion about last month, we spent the whole meeting talking about UVA's development at, what do they call it?
North Fork.
North Fork. And then I read in the papers the next 2 or 3 days, I'm like Will Rogers. All I know is what I read in the papers. But now the water people say they don't have enough water to supply that. Does anybody look at these things beforehand? And also, they announced that there was a proposal to cut Berkmar Drive all the way through to Airport Road. And tonight we see the plans for it. I mean, do things move that quick, or what's going on here?
Actually, I don't think, I think that what showed up in the paper was pretty much what we saw from the meeting, from the presentation, and it's still being reviewed by the planning commission, not the planning commission, the planning staff at this point, as far as I know. And I think that one of the things I want to put on the agenda for next month is get and give some feedback on that project. So, I think we'll probably try and deal with that next month, but I'll check with I think it's Bill Fritz that he's the planner on it, and try and get a timeline on that as to when they think it might go to the planning commission. Or obviously they're not going to give us any information on what any comments or requirements they may have. They're basically, I think the planning staff is working on it at this time and evaluating the proposal. And yes, one of the things that was issues in the proposal is water. So that, we'll try and deal with that next month if we can. Okay.
Well, also, I'd like to, I saw in the list of future projects early on in the meeting, one of them was Prophet Road. Can we get any more updates to when, how, what, especially concerning the railroad bridge?
Yeah, Jessica.
I'm gonna again have to defer to Kevin. I'm not sure about Prophet Road.
Yeah, so Prophet Road is we through the prioritization process, or through the comprehensive plan, really, we recognize that Prophet Road is in need of upgrades, both for operational aspects and also bicycle and pedestrian aspects. So that's why you see that segment, and that's really just Prophet Road to the elementary school. From 29 to the elementary school is what we've identified as the area that we would like to see those improvements. It does not go to the railroad underpass. I think are you talking about the one that's sort of it's actually maybe closer to Polo Grounds? Is that the underpass, or is there?
Yes,
Okay,
but
the
it's
one
the overhead crossing of the railroad, not the underpass.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we had not, that wasn't identified as a project in our early evaluation, but we can take a look at that and see. I believe that is in the rural area of the county, not in the development area. And so that might be why it hadn't been identified as a project, but we can take a look at it. And once again, like Jessica said, what we often do is look at operations or safety issues, and that's how we identify them. So we would kind of check what the background of the road is in that area and see if we've identified problems.
Well, I hope some years ago, VDOT surveyed it all the way to the school. It was put in the 6-year plan, and it bounced around for a few years, and then it disappeared.
Interesting. Well, I don't know that. I don't know that history of it, but we will take a look at it and see.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have Supervisor Lepisto.
Yes. Jimmy, are you talking about the condition of the road? Are you talking about the actual railroad bridge? Are you talking about Dr. Hertz's property along Prophet?
No, we're just
Polo
talking
Grounds Road.
general upgrade of, because of the school was the original reason, I thought. that they had it surveyed and put 4 lanes down to Worth Crossing and then 3 lanes down to Terry Brook and then 2 lanes on the sidewalk all the way to the school.
Okay, so you're thinking that the Polo Grounds Road or Profit would be enlarged with more lanes and sidewalks? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, maybe not more, but better.
Better. Okay. I do know, because I spoke with VDOT a few weeks ago, and I do know there's a large project they will be redoing or filling up the potholes on Polo Grounds Road, and that they're just waiting for good weather. And so as soon as that happens, everything's planned, paid for. They're just waiting to pull the trigger as soon as they have good weather, and that should be happening soon. But that's what I was trying to find out exactly what you were referring to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And now Seth,
Thanks. I had a quick question about the data used to determine projects. I know obviously safety is the first one and operations. Do you look at, I'm just thinking about school bus transportation, which is after inclement weather, we have really predictable areas in which we can't access with school buses, which is why schools remain closed for extended periods of time. Is that a factor in data in which parts of the county are inaccessible by school buses that need improvements?
I'm not entirely sure. Kevin's unmuted himself. I'm going to hand it off.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. So I will say we've always worked with school division and their transportation department pretty closely. When they have issues that they know to contact us, and we try and work on projects. It is something that we look at when we're identifying projects, especially primarily there at the comprehensive plan or master plan stage. When you're speaking of roads that are difficult to access by school, it made me think that we also, as Jessica had mentioned, we have that secondary 6-year plan that has paving funding for paving unpaved roads. And that's a factor that we look at when we're trying to prioritize which unpaved roads we may want to pave. So we reach out to school transportation department and see if they've had issues on certain roads, with especially in snow or any other bad weather, I guess, and take that input to the board if they have something when we're trying to prioritize those projects. And also the school knows that if there's a specific road that is unpaved and that they've had problems on, they can put in that request to try and get that funded. So we do work with them on both those issues.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm just going to jump right in here, if I may, Bill, to address this question. Is that we're also on the Regional Transportation Authority, which I'm on, trying to get smaller buses to accommodate those children in the rural areas, because as you know, we have some large school buses that actually go down a rural road back into somebody's driveway to be able to get out, which takes a lot of time and is not the safest thing to do. So we're actually trying to see whether or not we can get some even small vans that are that would be compliant with the school standards.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing more in transportation, I wanted to turn it over to David for a few minutes. Dave Benish, to give us a little bit of a heads up on the upcoming CA, how the CAC is going to be dealt with in, I think, the next fiscal year, David?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
Technically starting today. But,
okay.
And I'll explain that in just a second, but we are rolling out a new approach to CAC scheduling and agendas so that we can better plan ahead for topics. And also we're trying to coordinate the schedule and staffing for our upcoming comprehensive plan update. And those are the two main reasons for this approach, and that's twofold. The comp plan update is getting underway. Our long range planning team is the same team who are the staff liaisons for the CAC for you all and the others. So we want to make sure that we can still support the CAC meetings for the topics of need, but also appropriately have resources to do and move forward with our comprehensive plan in an expeditious way. We are also intentional about the schedule that we're proposing here, in the hopes that we can encourage CAC members to attend comprehensive plan update engagement opportunities. Get to in just a second, but that's kind of what you see at the bottom of this slide, is some of those general area timeframes for workshops. The 2022 schedule that we are moving forward with will have pre-planned topics alternating with reserved meeting times for community meetings. The topics are those that we know have been of interest to most of the CACs and are those that are major ongoing initiatives in the county. So those are the meetings that you see in shaded color every other month. The development review meetings, the alternate months, the white shaded, those development meetings are legislative reviews that require meetings of the CAC for our process to be complete for rezonings and special uses primarily. If there's no need to have one of those community meetings on those alternating months, we'd recommend that the meeting be canceled. But those meetings are sort of held for those required community meetings. Timing with these alternating months will work out to coincide with the comp plan public meetings, as I just mentioned a second ago. And we hope that that will encourage CAC members to come. So when you look at the schedule, you'll see today you had the transportation planning presentation that all CACs except one are getting this March. April would be either a meeting that you don't need to have, or for you all, and I'll go over this in just a minute, you actually do have a community meeting scheduled for April. But what the long-range planning staff and for the comp plan update are trying to do is get these workshops that you see at the bottom of the page related to the comp plan update coordinated with these potential free months. And hopefully that will encourage you to come attend and participate in that process. Useful maybe for you to know that the proposed county budget for FY23, which begin in July, includes 2 new position requests. Those positions could provide support to the CACs. So we're hopeful to get staff that can help cover our needs with the CAC. But we will be using this modified approach for meetings, at least until we can get those positions filled. It's also our expectation that in collaboration with CAC members and the board, that the staff will evaluate this approach at the end of 2022 and solicit feedback to determine whether this is an effective way to manage the CACs in the future. So just real quickly, as I said, we've had our transportation presentation. The other items that are scheduled are the climate action plan and the budget overview for May. For July, there is a proposal to have a summer recess that has been popular with some CACs to actually take that time off since there's so many vacations that fall into that period. In September, there's a proposal or there's a presentation on parks and green systems. And in November, economic development and the county strategic plan. So that's the outline. You will see here these intervening months. You guys, and I'm gonna just skip forward here. Sorry. There we go. No, this isn't working. Next meeting in April, you actually will have a community meeting on a special use permit 2205 for the Community Christian Academy at the Riverstone Church. That's in the area that's in the entrance of Hollymead, near Hollymead Drive. So next month, you will have a meeting because we have to hold that community meeting. And Bill, I believe we need to, my understanding is you may need to hold elections. So I went on and put that down for here. If that's true, that would be an item that we would want to get taken care of next month.
Okay.
So I can go back to the previous slide and answer any questions that you might have on it.
Carolyn, is there anyone else that has a question?
No, just you, Bill. Oh, wait, no, Virginia does.
Okay, Virginia, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a question about, it seemed like in the past, if there were more than 3 of us at a meeting, we had to record the meeting or we couldn't talk about what we talk about in the meetings.
You won't be able to have a meeting unless you have a quorum.
Right,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just seemed like we had some of these community meetings and we had to say whether or not we were going ahead of time so that,
This meeting, you will call your meeting to order and conduct that meeting as you would normally do, just like we did today. Sometimes members of CACs are invited to other meeting locations, and when 3 or more of you go to another meeting, you either have to call a meeting or not converse amongst each other about the project. So we'll usually give you a request to stay silent and just listen, or there may be a circumstance where 2 CACs or another CAC is invited to a second CAC to hear a community meeting, and they both just might open and close the meeting just to allow for a conversation. We sort of handle that case by case, but you are correct. You have to, if 3 or more of you show up at a meeting, you have to be careful about communicating or establishing that you're holding the meeting. And meetings have to be advertised. So
okay.
we have to know in advance if 3 or more are coming and they want to converse.
And just to clarify, April 14th is a Sunday?
Is it? I'm sorry, I didn't do the presentation. I thought that was Thursday. It would be at your normal meeting time.
Yeah, that's a Thursday, April 14th.
April 14th or April
It's a
4th?
Thursday. April 14th is the second Thursday.
Second Thursday.
Okay.
Oops, let me get, okay, just a quick question on these every other month meeting, like the May, July, or the May, September, November. Will they be joint meetings of all the CACs, or are you going to do these presentations individually?
Well, the plan is to do them individually. So
Okay.
Jessica and Kevin have been going to all the other CACs and kind of running through the presentation. If there may be certain timing issues or priorities, there is a possibility that you may be invited to another meeting to listen to it. But as it's planned right now, the idea is that the staff would go to each CAC.
Okay, so it won't be a joint meeting of all the CACs.
Not necessarily. That's not the intent. It's intended for you to attend. Staff would attend each of the CACs individually.
And then the idea also is that we would have time to do these comprehensive plan workshops, you know, and we'll be invited to those, I would presume.
Yes, part of the theory with this is with the limited staff time, making sure that the CAC liaisons, who are the long-range planners, have time to work on the comp plan. But conversely, they are in outlining the workshops, like the examples you see at the bottom of the page. They're working with the notion that the April, June, August, October timeframes are the ones that would be best available for CACs, because they won't have that monthly meeting. So it won't be too onerous on you to double up on meetings.
Okay. So yeah, next month, in addition to those two things, because I was going to try and organize some feedback on both the North Fork project and also a little more feedback on remember we had the presentation on the middle range density. So that's basically the plan for our next meeting, and April 4th. And before we adjourn, B, did you have anything else you wanted to update us on as the liaison?
We are just beginning the whole budget process. We have about 6 work sessions this month and in April. So if you want anything, if you want any money, let me know. No, just kidding.
Okay.
All of our money is going for the schools. I knew Seth would like that. But yes, we're in the process. We're taking it in phases, and we've got about a little over $500 million budget. So it's a lot, but
Yeah,
that's
have
okay.
fun.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to, unless anybody has any objection, I'm going to go ahead and announce that the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, April 14th at 6:30 p.m. The public is invited and is able to participate. It'll be announced. I don't want to go through that whole and so, and I think we'll have time to cover all of those things because the special use permit, there's really no change to the building, so it shouldn't be too much. It's more of an education issue when I was looking at it than anything else. I don't think it will have a great deal of impact on the immediate neighborhood. Possibly a little more traffic, and we can deal with that. But we'll go through it. We'll have the presentation on it, and hopefully all of you did everybody get the email that Carolyn sent out on that? It was part of that. I think it. If not, I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of it so that they can look at the actual proposal. So unless anybody has any objections, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming, and thank the new members for joining. I really appreciate the fact that we have a really robust committee at this time. So, good night.
Night.
Thanks, guys.